right. Okay, can you hear me? You can hear me? Oh, awesome. Great, 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 great. All right, all right. All right, we're all working. I didn't mean to, I did not mean to start a stream right now. It's super accident. I was originally going to do the Twitch stream, but I forgot I had it set up to YouTube stream. And then as soon as I stream and I see everybody's paying attention to me, what a big shot. And then I'm like, oh man, I've got to go back to do the streaming then. All right, so. All right, now, I've got way more buddies on this than I do on Twitch anyway, so I'm cool to do this. So, what's up, everybody? How we all doing? I just got back from having dinner with my parents. Had some good salmon. I've got a video coming for you guys tomorrow. We can all look forward to that. How is the quality of the stream? Is it super laggy or is it pretty smooth? If I move my hand around like this, does it move smoothly or does it move super choppy? All right. Good. It's good. It's good. All right. It's kind of laggy. It's fine. It's decent. It's smooth. It's not bad. All right. So it's okay. So what do you guys want me to talk about? Did you guys got any questions for me? Don't talk too much on the stream. Just a little laggy. You guys read my latest Washington Post piece? I see my friend Robert was saying that he had. Okay. I was watching Fox with my parents, watching the Laura Ingraham show. Do you people watch Fox? It's quite something. What time is it? All right, that's an easy question. We can start with that. So right now, it is 9:25. All right, a lot of people are asking me for my opinion on the 2020 elections in America. My guess is I suspect that old man Trump is going to win. But that's not a very interesting opinion, is it? All right, Ben Shapiro opinion. That's a good question. So he's referring to the Ben Shapiro thing. Ben Shapiro's interview on BBC recently. I'm sure you people saw that. Did you see that? It was pretty wild. The interviewer is terribly biased against Ben Shapiro, and so he asks him a bunch of gotcha questions. But on the other hand, Ben Shapiro clearly not really into an interview format that is as adversarial as that one. And I don't know if he handled himself super well. You know, Ben Shapiro has this new book out that is supposedly, you know, sort of reinventing himself as a kind of serious conservative intellectual, like his buddy Jordan Peterson, instead of just a sort of, right-wing angry man. And it seems like this is something that Ben Shapiro is going to have a difficult time with because, you know, he has such a long body of work as a polemicist. It's very difficult to transition from polemicist to serious guy. Hold on. Sebastian is asking me, saw a video of you at UBC and I asked Ben Shapiro a question? Yes, that was me. If you Google J.J. McCullough, Ben Shapiro, you can watch me ask the fellow a question. I asked him a question about Indian reservations, which is a topic that I care a lot about, but I haven't really ever heard him express opinions on. Question I've been asking for a while is, what is your opinion on the whole Space Force thing? I don't really have an opinion on that. It seems like a bit of a gimmick, but, interstellar, planetary, I don't know, that realm of policy is something I really do not have very much knowledge on. Pro-Jared conflict? I don't know what that is, although it sounds vaguely familiar. All right, let's see what else we're getting. Please don't talk about pro-Jared, because no one cares. What do you think about the Canadian election 2019? I think old man Trudeau will win another term. I'm kind of contrary on that because right now it is very fashionable to predict that Trudeau will lose because the media has really turned very sharply against him. It's making his life very difficult. But I think that when push comes to shove, people will turn for him. Is every political candidate an old man to JJ? I love the expression old man. The old man Trudeau, old man Ben Shapiro, old man Trump. I just think it's a really fun turn of phrase. I saw you follow Nick Strength and Power on Instagram. Yeah, that's just a random guy I followed. I saw that he's very popular, a YouTuber in sort of the fitness scene. I like following sort of random YouTubers because it's interesting to see in sort of realms that I don't normally care very much about. It's interesting to see how they conduct themselves because when you're following a YouTube channel that you're not interested in the subject matter of, you can focus more on just the professionalism and the the production quality and that kind of thing. I think that can be fun. So thoughts on Joe Biden? I feel like right now he would be my guess that he would get the nomination, but that's also not a very interesting opinion because everybody thinks that right now. Although it is interesting how much he seems to be marketing himself as a sort of centrist kind of candidate in the style of Hillary Clinton. I saw today he had a position out where he's sort of saying, like, can we find the middle ground on climate change? And the sort of the far left of his party was really going bananas about that. And that's going to be a challenge for him because there's a lot of people that are going to say, oh my God, he's Hillary all over again. We need a true progressive. He's just going to lose. All right, here's a paid question from Big Mac 1599. How do you feel about BC gas prices? I think BC gas prices are far too high because of our terrible carbon tax. But, because British Columbia politics is a debate between the left and the far left, or I should say the left and the more left. We have the Liberal Party and we have the NDP. We have no Conservative Party to speak of here. The Liberal Party brought in the carbon tax. The NDP thinks the carbon tax is great. So we were the first province to have a carbon tax, and I'm sure we'll be the last to get rid of it. JJ, can you make a video about religion? I want to make a video about religion one day. I want to make a video about different types of Christianity because I think that's something that's very interesting to me. But it will require a lot of research to get right. Yes, John Nathan, I can see your chat. My thought on Bernie Sanders is I suspect he will not get the nomination. I suspect he will be underwhelming. You can hang me by this quote if he winds up being a successful 3-term president of the United States. Someone keeps asking me what is my opinion on religion. I don't know. I think religion's very interesting. Look, I even have this little box of cards right here. 50 religions that might save you. So I like learning about religion a lot. I like learning about different types of Christianity a lot. I would say I'm not a religious person, but I'm also not an anti-religious person. Although I like hearing religious people talk, I like hearing atheists talk. I don't know. As I get older, I become less opinionated about things and more just curious about things. Okay, the comments are coming so quickly, I cannot keep track. You know, half asleep Chris, I was his 112th subscriber. He is really amazing, and the comment flew away too quickly. What are the policy you agree with the left right now? That's a good question. So, one thing I agree with the left very much on is transgender rights. I'm very big into that. I do think that this is one of the big challenges of our time is sorting out, equal rights for transgender people. And that's something that I've put my neck out. You know, I have offended a lot of conservatives by writing in favor of transgender rights, but I really do see it as being very analogous to the struggle for homosexual acceptance. And as a gay man myself, I see a lot of analogies there. So that's something where I do agree with the left. You know, the left goes too far on this, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that there's not enough compassion for the genuine concerns that people have with that issue, but I do think it is ultimately an important moral issue of our time, and I'm comfortable as allying with the left on that one. Alberta threatening to separate from Canada, I don't think will ever happen. There are no politicians in Alberta who support that. Premier Kenney wants to be Prime Minister way too badly to be associated with any sort of separatism. And unless it gets mainstream political endorsement from someone, it's never going to happen as a thing. Ever been to Nunavut, Yukon, or the Northwest Territories? I have not. It is very expensive and very difficult to get to that part of the country. Well, maybe not Yukon. I guess I could go there. Okay, hold on a second. I just need to get some water. I'm very thirsty. It is hard talking to people. Makes my throat dry. Heart of Iron 4. Is that the World War I game? Someone made a video about Saskatchewan wanting to join the US. What do I think about legal marijuana? I have written on a number of occasions criticism of legalizing marijuana. I think it is an ill-conceived idea, but I also get that I'm on the losing end of that issue, so, you know, my country's already legalized it. I don't know how much more I can squawk about it at this point. You should make a video about anti-American sentiment in Canada. Yes, I definitely should. It is a very important issue and one that has long been interesting to me. What do you think of Canada sending its trash to the Philippines? I think it is a good example of how Canada is not as beloved by the rest of the world as we like to think we are. Canadians have a real tendency to send their garbage to other parts of the world, not just to the Philippines, but here in British Columbia, there's a lot of controversy about the amount of sewage that we pump into Washington State. Questions are coming too fast. Stanley Cup riots in Vancouver. I remember I was up at SFU, which is where I went to school, up on Burnaby Mountain. And from that elevated position, I could see the smoke billowing from Vancouver down below. Am I in a relationship? I am not in a relationship. Mayor Pete seems to be winning the support of the media class, but and a certain sort of intellectual subset. But latest polls seem to suggest that he is not doing as well as he was for a moment there. So I suppose we'll have to see. I definitely think that he'll be, I don't know, maybe he'll be in the top 5 candidates. Is that a safe prediction? I hate making predictions. How many Canadian provinces have I visited? I have visited British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec. End of list. Do you think an alliance between the U.S. and Canada is growing tighter or further apart? I think on every level except maybe the political, we're growing closer. And that's not to say that I think that Canada and America are politically different. I just think that the leadership class of both countries is sort of mutually disinterested in each other at the moment. And I think it will take true leadership on both the U.S. president and the Canadian prime minister to put more effort into sustaining and building that relationship. Do a travel video to Japan. I think that would be cool. Have you ever had interest in visiting the American South? Absolutely. I would love to go to the American South. I've been to Texas, but I would like to go to Alabama or Arkansas or a place like that. Have you ever been recognized in public? Many, many times. I've been recognized in public several times this week alone. I'm very lucky because I look so strange. People easily identify me. Do I have any phobias? I'm afraid... Actually, I shouldn't tell you because people will just spam me with them. Here's my friend Sharad from India who has given me 50 rupees. No question, just a small thank you. Well, thank you, man. Are you looking to become a U.S. citizen one day? First step would be to become a U.S. resident one day, which I would like to do if that opportunity presented itself. I don't stream much anymore. No, I don't. Isn't that unfortunate? I always forget. I'm super busy. Getting my comment read is impossible. Well, I just read it. What are your opinions on Maxime Bernier? I think Maxime Bernier will not be successful. I suspect that he might not even get a single MP elected, but I think that he could probably cost the Conservatives at least a few elections. That's awesome. Canadian said that he was raised to be anti-American, but is growing to be more pro-American, so good on you. JJ, is British Columbia better than the American Pacific Northwest? Well, British Columbia is part of the American Pacific Northwest, so it's not really any different. What are your opinions on Canadian healthcare? I'm going to work on a video about that soon, I think. Canadian healthcare is fine, I guess. It's similar to American healthcare in a lot of ways, for reasons I will talk about in the video someday. Doing a video about passports, that would be pretty cool. Somebody is talking about my opinions on the president of Brazil. I don't know that much about him. I saw that video that 3 Arrows made. I thought that was pretty persuasive. That I don't know how you say the fellow's name, but that he's kind of, I don't know, a bit of a reactionary guy who has some questionable opinions on Brazil's own recent history. Will you ever learn French? Absolutely not. Is there a political issue that is argued about in Canada that doesn't seem to come up in the politics of the rest of the world? Sure, there's lots of issues like that. There's lots of sort of domestic issues. I mean, the French-English bilingualism is obviously a very Canadian issue. Some of the issues relating to institutional reform, like the Senate and the monarchy, those are very Canadian issues that play out in a very Canadian way. What made you learn more about politics and when did you start to gain an interest? A lot of that happened when I was in high school. I became interested in political cartoons and I became interested in politics so I could make better political cartoons. It was funny, my interest in the cartoons came before my interest in the politics. And then when 9/11 happened, that was very politically sort of radicalizing. Well, not radicalizing. That was a moment in which I really started to take politics much more seriously because it seemed very, I don't know, very important. Have I heard of ContraPoints? Yes, I have. I've watched a few of her videos. They all seem pretty good to me. How old are you? I'm 34 years old. I'm going to be 35 in 2 months. Biden will mess up and drop out, and last 2 times he ran for president. See, I think the problem is, this is a very common opinion, a lot of folks think that Biden, because he failed at his 2 previous presidential runs, he'll fail at this one too. But, I think that Biden is a former vice president now. He's sort of a statesman-like figure now. He's a man of much more substance and much more fame than he was when he was just some, senator from Delaware. So I do think that, people can read too much into his pattern of failure. Okay, my friend Alex has paid me to answer the question. GOP versus Canadian Conservatives on LGBT issues. Sorry if inappropriate question. The Conservative Party is, a very hierarchical party, so it's much easier to talk about them as having one issue, one perspective on any issue. Republicans are very diffused, so Republicans have a whole bunch of different issues. There's some more pro-gay Republicans, or more pro-LGBT Republicans than others. But anyway, the point is that the Conservative Party of Canada is very nervous about being perceived as being anti-LGBT. So I feel it goes out of its way to basically not try to talk about those issues too much. They did vote against some of the pro-LGBT legislation that Justin Trudeau has put forward during his time as Prime Minister. But I don't really think it's an issue that they're that interested in demagoguing too much about. I suppose they will express just enough criticism of the LGBT cause in order to keep sort of the Christian faction of their party in line, but it's certainly not something that they go out of their way to take very strong positions on, because it is seen as a social issue, and the conventional wisdom in the Conservative Party scene is that social issues sort of freak out the kind of middle-class voters, the kind of moderate middle-class voters that the Conservative Party is trying to win over. What are your thoughts on Ben Shapiro and his political outlook? Pays another friend of mine to answer. I've been thinking about making a video about this because I was talking a little bit earlier about Ben Shapiro's, disastrous interview on BBC, an interview that was disastrous not entirely because of what Ben Shapiro himself did. I think the interviewer was quite awful as well. Ben Shapiro spent a lot of his life, his young life, trying to be a very provocative, very, combative, partisan, ideological figure. He is now trying to pivot, as he gets a little bit older, to being a little bit more of a thoughtful, philosophical kind of guy, a sort of more serious, substantial thinker like Jordan Peterson, someone like that. I think that transition is proving very difficult for him because Ben Shapiro has this very, very long track record of just saying, outrageous, provocative things. And as the BBC interview showed, he gets called out on that kind of stuff, and it's very difficult, because of his past, for him to be taken seriously as a sort of more thoughtful figure. All right. Sorry, you guys are asking me so many questions, I have to try to answer them quickly. Why do you talk so fast? I talk so fast so that I can answer a lot of questions, but I'm also just a naturally fast-talking person. "15-minute of Ben Shapiro being triggered over John Lennon's Imagine." Yes, it's very funny, actually. Ben Shapiro does go way too far on a lot of issues. I'll just come out and say that. I mean, I think Ben Shapiro is very, very smart young man. I think he's very clever, very intelligent, but, he traffics in a kind of rhetoric that's just over the top a lot of the times, and it's not, it makes it hard to hear his points because he's too busy being provocative. Anyway, my friend Paul asks me, "It's really exciting watching your channel grow. I'm excited to see what you have in store for the future." Oh, well, that's very kind, Paul. By tomorrow, I should have 90,000 subscribers. Isn't that exciting? That means I'm just the big 100,000 is in reach. Your view, who won the War of 1812, the US or Canada? Well, there was no Canada in 1812. There was no Canadian government. There was no Canadian authority. There was just a British colony being run by the British, for British interests. America retained its sovereignty. So did the British colonies so did Britain's Canadian colonies. So, I think 1812 was a war that both sides won and both sides lost. Okay, Alex asks me, what is your view on the xenophobic opinions in Quebec? Will they have a growth in, what does this say? Will they have a growth in liberal opinions, sort of like Japan? That's an interesting analogy. I never really thought of that before. I guess in some ways Quebec is kind of like Japan, isn't it? In that they have a real strong sense of a kind of like national, cultural, ethnic identity that's very strong and very profound. The French Canadians really do believe that Quebec exists to be their political expression of their culture and their people. This naturally lends itself to xenophobia in the same way that Japanese society can be quite xenophobic. It's not, when you have an idea of a country that exists by and for only one group of people, it is very difficult to embrace true liberalism, I think, because true liberalism requires a kind of colorblind attitude. Sorry, I have to answer this next question here. Thoughts on media censorship? I'm against media censorship, although I do think that people should self-censor to some degree. I think that's important. I think that, but I also don't cry any tears when Facebook or Twitter bans sort of far-right or sort of obnoxious, hateful people, Farrakhan and that sort of set. I don't think that that's wrong. I think private businesses have a right to censor all they want. But I don't think the government should be in the business of censoring. Thoughts on the new flag of Pocatello? No longer ugly. Yes, it's great. It's a good example of how flag reform can be productive. Okay, my friend Dr. Chicken says, what do you think about Brexit? I don't really have very strong opinions on Brexit. I think it's some sort of issue for the Brits to sort out for themselves. I find it very, very confusing issue, and I don't know. And I actually kind of resent the fact that sort of the mainstream right-wing sort of American journalism system expects me to care about Brexit, and I really just don't on some level. I feel like they can't seem to pull it off, so that suggests to me that it probably was an idea that they did not think through fully, or were not, sufficiently serious about. So in that sense, it definitely seems like a bit of a flop. You have to kind of draw conclusions based on that. Jackson asks me, what happened Gay by Gay and legalized shrooms? That's not really a coherent question, my friend. Gay by Gay, though, was a show that I made with my friend Adam. Then I guess we both sort of kind of mutually lost interest in it. I moved to Toronto around that time. Adam is busy with his own projects. I'd like to collaborate with Adam again in some capacity, though, because now I'm back in Vancouver. But, Adam is a big successful actor, and he's very busy, so. All right, my friend Arthur Curry, named after famous World War I general from Canada. What's your opinion on Jason Kenney? I think I have never been a huge fan of Jason Kenney, to be perfectly honest. I think he is a very, very ambitious self-promoter. I think that he has a lust for power above everything else, and I think that he'll do what it takes to get it. I think, you have to admire that. I think how he became Premier of Alberta is kind of heroic in its own way. He exerted a lot of, strength of character just to make that happen. I was skeptical he'd be able to pull it off, but he did, so kudos to him. He now wants to be Prime Minister. I think that much is obvious, and he'll do whatever it takes to become Prime Minister. He's very good at playing the media. He's very good at getting good headlines for himself, but, I don't really know what he actually believes deep down, because I think he's very good at sort of telling every audience what they want to hear. All right, got some more paid questions here. What's your opinion on Seattle, and would you move? I think Seattle's a fantastic city. I'd love to move there if I had an opportunity to. I don't think it's better than Vancouver. I think the two cities are very similar, and they all have their pluses and minuses, but Seattle's a great city, and I'd absolutely be happy to live there if the opportunity came up. Thoughts on Colorado's legalization of shrooms? I don't know. I guess it wasn't supposed to happen, was it? When the marijuana was legalized, they said, oh, it's not going to make them legalize all drugs, but, if they're legalizing magic mushrooms, I mean... Sorry, I'm getting a little bit tired here. I'm answering these questions pretty fast and furious. Opinions on the monarchy in Canada. I'm opposed to the monarchy in Canada. I think it's dumb. What were you doing when 9/11 happened? Were you in school? That's a good question. Yes, I was in school. I was in my final year. I was in the 12th grade. I was in my senior year of high school. I was in the car with my mother, and she was driving me to school in the morning, and we heard it on the radio. I remember having a very difficult time imagining the idea of the towers being gone. It just seemed so impossible. It was very freaky. I mean, I have very vivid memories, sense memories of that. I will never forget it. Never forget 9/11. We spent the whole day in school talking about it, just watching it on TV. Have you followed the upcoming Australia election at all, and do you have any interest in coming to Australia? I'm sad to say I have not followed the Australian election at all. I don't have much to say about it, I'm afraid. I don't really know. I haven't really been following it very closely. I mean, there's been a lot of there's a lot of elections going on right now between South Africa and India, Australia, here in Canada and America, obviously there's election talk. So there's only so many elections I can pay attention to, unfortunately, and I haven't been following the Australian situation. I would like to go to Australia, I think, someday. I mean, it would be fun. It's very far away from where I live, and the thought of that long travel is a little bit of a turnoff, I must say. I also don't really have any friends in Australia, and I tend to only travel to places where I know people. Andrew Yang and UBI. Gun control and Bill 771C. Okay, I don't know what Bill 71C is, so I can't speak to it. Andrew Yang, I think the Yang mentum has dried up. He seems like he had a bit of a flash in the pan, but it seems like some of his internet weirdo friends are bringing him down a bit. Got him some bad press that it doesn't seem like he's very easily recovered from. Universal basic income, I think, is a dumb idea. I heard an interview with Andrew Yang on the Fifth Column podcast a while ago. Good podcast, by the way. And I thought that Yang didn't really do a very good job of defending the universal basic income from some of the very obvious, critiques of it. Like where is the money going to come from, and the negative effects that it can have on the on sort of the social, I think that work provides a lot of positive social effects independent of the fact that, we make money from it. And I think if you take away paid labor, you're not only taking away the pay, but you're also taking away the labor, and that has negative cultural consequences. Thoughts on the American states cracking down on abortion? I'm pro-life, but I do think you have to be very careful about what you're going to do when you're trying to move people in that direction. And I think that a lot of these southern states are really overplaying their hand, and feel like that's probably going to do more harm than good to the pro-life cause in the long term. I mean, like, the fact is it just makes the pro-life states it makes the pro-choice states even more pro-choice, and the pro-choice states ultimately have more people. So, if the goal is fewer abortions, Alabama can ban abortions all at once, but in the grand scheme of things, wouldn't it be more important to make progress in, like, New York or California? I'm not really convinced that that's going to happen. Okay, my friend here says, just a U.S. high school student saying, thanks for the great videos. Well, thank you, my friend. I'm doing my best here. It's tough. Did you have any crushes in high school? Of course I did. Didn't know how to express myself well at the time. Okay, my friend David says, would you support abolishing the death penalty? I think there's a case to be made for the death penalty in some very extreme cases, cases of terrorism, cases of really awful murders. Incidentally, death penalty is quite popular in Canada. Most Canadians support the death penalty, but, the government doesn't want it to have it. It's very difficult to bring the death penalty back once it's been banned, I think. I suspect it will be banned in America at some point, maybe through a court ruling or just all of the states, sort of one by one, will either ban it or make it reserved for only the most extreme of cases. A lot of people keep asking me about Venezuela. I don't know, it seems like a pretty bad situation over there, doesn't it? I suppose at some point they'll probably just have to have a coup. You watch these situations long enough, as you get older, I've seen this story play out. And I feel like it only ever ends in a coup at some point. At some point the military will rise up and overthrow him and they'll have a new government. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be resolved peacefully. But then again, people would have said that about Syria, and that guy's still trucking along. What do I think about bullet trains in Canada? I don't really have a strong opinion on that. It would be nice if there was more efficient travel between the Canadian provinces, but Canada is so big. Ultimately, the most efficient form of travel is, in fact, airline travel. Biden or Bernie? Well, I would support Biden if I was a Democrat. I mean, Biden is clearly the more centrist option. And I would much rather have a centrist Democrat as president than a socialist Democrat as president. Wouldn't you? Alexander has paid me 10 Swedish crowns. Well, thank you, my friend. I don't remember how much that is in Canadian money. What is better on paper, the US presidential system or the British parliamentary system? Well, one, I don't like the phrase presidential system because it implies the president is the central figure in the US system, when really Congress, I think, is the central figure. But I do think the US system is a better system than the Canadian system. I think checks and balances is a very important virtue. And I think that the British system that Canada uses does not have effective checks and balances. It has checks and balances on the king or the queen, which is kind of a useless checks and balances to have. But, the prime minister is the person that exercises the royal prerogative. He's not a lot of checks and balances on him. What do you think of churches being tax exempt in the U.S.? I don't know. It is kind of weird, isn't it? A lot of churches these days are very overtly political, and I think that makes it difficult to argue that they deserve tax exempt status. It's harder and harder to argue that organized religion is so apart from politics that there's something sort of like morally and constitutionally wrong with forcing them to pay taxes, in the same way that, like, things that are tax exempt, like Indian nations and, and things like that are generally seen as being very, have really sort of opted out of the American mainstream. And I think that it's hard to argue that churches have done that. What do you think about the climate change? I don't know. I've been trying to sort of work through my own thoughts on that issue. I was actually writing an article in my little composition book this morning about climate change. It's a difficult issue to talk about in Canada just because Canada is not a very consequential country when it comes to carbon emissions. We give 2% of the world's carbon emissions. Maybe it's higher than that. Maybe it's closer to 5%. We pollute way out of proportion to how much of the population of the world we have. But, Canada is not going to solve climate change one way or another. So then it sort of the question becomes, well, what is Canada's climate change policy for? And is it just kind of like this moral thing? Like, is it just something that we do because we feel we have to, and because Canada has to sort of show off to the world that we're a good little country? 13-year-old in Malaysia, keep doing what you do. Do not give up. Do not quit. Well, thank you, my friend. How do you feel about the goals pushed by the mainstream LGBT community? Are they too left-leaning or excluding in any way, in your opinion? Well, sure they are. I mean, I think that I've talked about pride parades in the past and why I don't really like them. Like, I think that there is an element of the LGBT culture that is too sexualized and too explicitly sexualized, and I think that that can be off-putting to a lot of people that are not, that care about LGBT rights but don't really want to be pressed in that direction. You know, people that are modest. I think that that's a virtue that is not appreciated enough in the LGBT community. There's really definitely a culture of exhibitionism and immodesty that I think is very alienating to people like me that are a little bit more private about those sorts of things. All right, my friend here says, what do you expect in the future for Northern Ireland following the new IRA stuff that's been going on? Good question. I mean, it seems to me that the demographics are on the side of the Catholics / Republicans in the North. I mean, I think that, when I was there, I feel like that was something that a lot of people were talking about a lot. That, you know, ultimately it's just going to be sorted out demographically. The Catholics will outbreed the Protestants. They will become much more politically dominant, as they already are increasingly politically dominant in Dublin. And then at some point, I guess there'll just be a sort of peaceful reunification born by that. I don't know. It's a good question, though. All right, my other friend says, do you follow Polish politics at all? What is your opinion on the Law and Justice Party in Poland's upcoming election? They receive a lot of bad press. They do receive a lot of bad press. I think that some of the supposed war on democracy that Law and Justice is doing is kind of overrated. I think that a lot of it is just like, there's a lot of sort of, like, what's the word, where you sort of say, like, there's a lot of sort of assumption of bad motive on the part of the international press when it comes to judging what the Law and Justice Party does. You know, there's assumption, a kind of base assumption that everything they do is kind of motivated by, like, authoritarian tendencies, and I think that that's very unfair. I mean, I think, though, that there's a lot that's wrong with sort of Polish conservatism, Polish nationalism, you know, like this stuff about the law where you can't argue that the Poles, you know, had any sort of responsibility in regards to the Holocaust, like this kind of stuff. Like, the Poles are very sensitive people in a lot of ways, very proud people, and I think that there's an aspect of sort of law and justice that seems to sort of exploit some of the darker sides of that. Jason wants me to say, please have a good Ramadan. Sure, have a good Ramadan to all my Muslim friends. My sister lives in the Middle East. She was telling me about Ramadan season, how demanding that is, particularly for non-Muslims living in the Middle East. But, you know, for Muslims living in the Middle East, it's a happy time. Modi or Gandhi? This is a question I was struggling with when I made my video about the Indian politics. I think that Modi and Gandhi are both kind of flawed people in different ways. I think the Hindu nationalist stuff is kind of repulsive in some ways, at least to my sensibilities. But, you know, I think that sort of the corruption and entitlement and sort of establishment, you know, sort of arrogance of the Gandhi family is very off-putting as well. So I don't know who I would vote for if I was an Indian. Ever think of making a political video about Russia? What would I say in it? I mean, when you're talking about the politics in a dictatorship, it's a very different sort of politics. I mean, it could be interesting for sure. But ultimately, doesn't it all just come down to, well, Putin's the one in charge and what he says goes. So I think that when you talk about politics, I mean, I don't know, it's interesting though, because I know that even within a dictatorship, there's dynamics because there's, like, you know, people around Putin and who has the influence and who's on the ins and who's on the outs and which cabinet ministers are important. And that kind of thing. And that would be interesting to sort of get to know and get to understand. What do you think about Pakistan? Pakistan's interesting. I was learning about them a bit too when I was studying India. I'm interested in these kind of contrived countries. I think that like Pakistan in some respects is a country sort of like Canada or like New Zealand, in that so much of their national identity is just defined by not being something. Hold on a second. What do you think about LGBT rights in the U.S.? I think America is is very much the leader of the Western world when it comes to LGBT rights. I think that most LGBT right movements originate in the U.S. And I think that the U.S. Americans have a very leading role to play in the development of these sorts of movements and causes. And I think America is continuing to do that. I think that the interesting stuff about about trans rights is coming out of America, and I give Americans a lot of credit for that. I think it's a very healthy and important movement. What do you think about solipsism? Solipsism, bad, I guess. People shouldn't be engaging in sort of pointless rhetoric. Do you think this is a rising problem? I guess it is in some respects. I mean, I guess like a lot of our political rhetoric rises to the level of solipsism these days. A lot of people are sort of speaking. A lot of people speak thoughtlessly, speak in a way that is an argument of a style of argument that is not really substantial, in the sense that they like I don't know. I'm getting a little bit tired. I'm sorry. I'm not being as articulate as I once was, which is probably a good sign that I should probably take a break for the night. But I've enjoyed chatting with you guys. I have to post my video tomorrow morning. It's kind of a strange video, and I hope you guys like it, but we'll have to see. So, thanks so much for chatting with me, guys. I think it was a good chat. I don't do live chats very often. Sometimes the mood just strikes me. I just feel like talking to people. There's so many of you. I got a dab request, so I got to do it. All right, man. Guys, I'm hanging out. Peace out, guys.